Well, week one was a doozy. Already, the United States Supreme Court has heard two important cases, and I hope you're sitting down because those are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to controversial topics that the justices are going to be making big decisions about this term. We're talking about things like elections and tariffs and gerrymandering and presidential power. So I'm going to tell you about just a few of the big cases that I'm keeping an eye on, and maybe you should be too in this video. But the first thing I want to do is thank my paid Facts HQ subscribers for voting for this story as the bonus this week. If you want to vote on next week's bonus story, make sure you follow these easy steps and you become a paid subscriber too. So let's talk about what just happened last week. So last Tuesday, the justices heard oral arguments on a case called Childs v. Salazar. Childs is Kaylee Childs, a licensed counselor in Colorado who uses her Christian faith in her talk therapy for minors to engage in what most people would call sexual orientation or gender identity conversion therapy. Like many other states, in the state of Colorado, conversion therapy is banned. And the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that state law, saying Ms. Childs cannot use her version of talk therapy to try and convert minors from gay to straight, for example. Well, Ms. Childs sued, saying that the Colorado law violates her First Amendment rights because she says these are consensual conversations between herself and these minors, and her clients are seeking her out specifically because of her faith and because of her particular brand of therapy. After hearing about 90 minutes of oral arguments, it appears the justices are inclined to side with Ms. Childs and could perhaps overturn Colorado's law. And if that happens, it would impact about half of the states in this country that have also banned this type of conversion therapy. Last week, the justices also heard a case called Bost v. Illinois. Now, this is one of several election-related cases being heard this term. This one comes from Representative Mike Bost, a Republican from Illinois' 12th Congressional District. He is attempting to sue the state of Illinois over its election law that allows for mail-in ballots to be counted up to 14 days after an election, as long as those ballots are postmarked by Election Day. Bost says that law contradicts the federal law that sets the time for federal elections. Now, all the other federal courts that have heard this case have already said that Bost does not have standing to sue the state of Illinois over this law because he won by such a landslide. He was not harmed at all by this mail-in ballot law. But after last week's oral arguments, the justices appear to be supportive of Bost and his lawsuit. Now, this upcoming week, the justices will hear another important election-related case out of Louisiana that tackles gerrymandering. I've talked a lot about gerrymandering on my page, so go back and look at those videos if you're not quite sure what I'm talking about. Now, this case is interesting because it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't cases that in the end could reshape the Voting Rights Act. So in 2022, the state of Louisiana was sued over a gerrymandered map that took away one of two majority Black congressional districts. Now, in the end, a federal court demanded that the state legislature in Louisiana redraw that map and bring that district back because it disenfranchised those Black voters and violated the Voting Rights Act. Well, now, a group that calls itself Non-African American is suing, saying that the new map with two majority Black districts now violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. So now the Supreme Court is going to decide what to do not only with this Louisiana map, but also whether to strip even more protections allowed in the Voting Rights Act. Now, one last election-related case that I'm keeping an eye on, and you should probably too, is what some would consider a case about dark money in politics. It's a case called National Republican Senatorial Committee v. Federal Elections Commission. Now, in this case, the justices will be revisiting their own ruling from 2001 that upheld a limit on how much coordination can happen between political parties and individual candidates when it comes to how to spend those millions and millions and millions of dollars in campaign donations. Now, what's interesting about this case is then Senator J.D. Vance was part of the group who sued the Federal Elections Commission, saying that limiting the ability of a political candidate to coordinate the spending of all this campaign cash with his or her political party violates that candidate's First Amendment right. Now, let's talk about checking presidential power. So far, there are two big cases the justices will hear, including one I've already talked a lot about on my channel that will tackle whether President Trump has the power to enact these widespread tariffs on virtually all countries without the approval of Congress. So far, the Federal Appeals Court has said Trump does not have that power and his tariffs are illegal. Well, we're going to have to wait and see what the justices say when they hear that case on November 5th. The justices will also hear another presidential power case called Trump v. Slaughter, where the justices will decide whether the President of the United States has the power to fire members of an independent federal agency, like the Federal Trade Commission, which we know President Trump has already attempted to do. Now, this case does not necessarily talk about the Federal Reserve, which is really the biggest of the independent federal agencies, but it is possible the justices may make some kind of determination about the Fed too, given the fact that President Trump is also taking the unprecedented step of trying to remove the Federal Reserve governor. Now, it's important to know that there are a ton of cases right now that are working their way through the court system, and that means it's almost certain the justices will add more cases to the docket this term. So if you want to read more about any of the cases I mentioned, I'm going to email you all the documents in my next Backstage Q email, so make sure you sign yourself up.